Let's get back into chords for a moment. I want to call your attention to a chord that is a nemesis for many beginning players, which is the F. And I want to talk about what you may have learned as the easier F chord, which I actually disagree. I think it's the harder F chord. But I'm talking about the four-note version. And just to be distinct, and this is beyond the scope of, this is not a lesson on teaching you an F chord. We're assuming that you do know how to do this. But I do want to point out, I have made multiple references to not squeezing, to not applying pressure or force, but resting on the string. And you might be saying, well, what about a bar chord? But I want to point out to you that when I am playing this well, I don't have to apply pressure because the thumb against the side of the index finger is a very strong natural grip. And when we play this 6-note chord, I am pinching the first and second strings against the side of my finger. I am not trying to twist sideways. You see what this does to my shoulder. Again, lines and planes. The line of my arm is this way. It's that diagonal out. But when I bring my fingers to the strings like this, resting these three is very comfortable, very natural. Notice the line of my arm. My wrist is bent, but it's not overly bent. I can extend my index finger, which is what I need to be able to do. I'm forward enough that the line of my knuckles is in front of the plane of the guitar neck, and this allows me to just bring the finger in like this. Now, it's a 6-note chord, so we are duplicating notes. There are 3 Fs. There are 2 Cs. There's an A. We only need F, A, and C. When we play the 4-note chord, we have F, A, C, our F major triad, and then the octave F. Now, this bar is a little different, so be aware. We only need 2 strings. This is a different position from this. So this is one situation where I do need to apply a little pressure, and I am bending the tip segment back to comfortably cover these strings. I find for my hand that it feels better to me to cover 3 strings with that index finger. I have an easier time comfortably resting on those 3 strings. To my mind, going to 2 strings here is more work because it forces me to bear down. I have better leverage like this. So let's just look at this chord for a moment before we dig in any further. Ring finger on the F, D string. Here's the middle. Notice how relaxed that is. Look at the line of my hand. Pivot forward a little bit so that this finger is in the right position to lean. And what I want you to do then is to play that chord and release it. Strum it and release it. Because what we're going to do is we're going to move this up the neck. Now eventually you will get to know all of those chords. I said earlier that I don't think you have to know every note on the guitar right now, but that you do want some references. C is a pretty good reference because we play in C a lot. You ought to be aware that there is a C note on the 8th fret of both E strings. And if you play anything that involves sliding bar chords, you have probably played this C chord, 8th fret. So the 4-string version would be this. G chord, bar at the 3rd fret. 4-string version would be this. Why am I playing only 4 strings instead of the full bar chord? Well, it's a sonic choice. When we play different kinds of guitar parts, we're trying to fulfill different roles in the music. We're very often working off the accents that are suggested by the basic groove, or if there's a rhythm section playing, where they are putting the emphasis. I mentioned previously the idea of a backbeat, an accented 2nd and 4th count in a 4/4 measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is pretty typical of popular music. We're very used to hearing some kind of accented snap sound on 2 and 4, whether it's a snare drum or somebody snapping their fingers. Very frequently in certain kinds of music, you will hear that backbeat reinforced by what some players would call a chop. Motown records are full of this kind of thing. It's just a short chord on the treble strings. It's a high pitch. It's meant to cut. It's also meant to work with the sound of the snare drum or to emulate, if there isn't one, what that snare drum is doing, the role that it's playing in the music. Now, I could play the full 6-note chord, but it's a much thicker sound, and we're not looking at this in isolation. We're looking at this as one piece of a whole. And so the 4-note chord sits much more naturally. It doesn't occupy as much sonic space in terms of lows, middles, and highs. This is more the high notes, more the bite, more the chop, more the snap. Now, you need to be able to hit the chord and immediately release, and then when we change frets, we maintain contact but glide. Now, in terms of the picking hand, I'm coming in with a rotation. I've mentioned how the movements are all basically the same. It's just a question of degree and direction. Because I want to really bring out those high notes, I'm going to come in from a little bit outward, and I actually want, I've said earlier that we weren't doing this, and in the context of just strumming a G chord, we're not. But in the context of making something snap, I want a little bit of percussion. I want the strings to slap against the fingerboard, and so my pick attack coming from a little bit out and turning this way helps to emphasize that.